Rimuru and Ultima goes to One Piece, Rimuru and Ultima x One Piece, by Veldanava-God. Chapter 29. Return to Veldoria Island. As their ship cut smoothly through the open sea, Rimuru and Ultima stood side by side on the deck, watching the sun glisten over the waves. It had been weeks since the war against Whitebeard's former territories began. With each island they conquered, their power grew, and their reputation spread far and wide. Yet, there was only one island they hadn't laid claim to, Fishman Island, now under the protection of Big Mom. Rimuru looked at Ultima, his eyes calm but thoughtful. "I still can't believe we're leaving Fishman Island untouched," he said, his voice contemplative. "It feels odd not to dominate it like the others." Ultima shrugged, her lips curling into a playful smirk. "As fun as it would be to claim it, it's not worth dealing with Big Mom right now. One Yonku war at a time, Rimuru. We don't need unnecessary distractions." Rimuru chuckled, shaking his head. "True enough. One battle at a time. We'll deal with her eventually." The sea breeze ruffled Ultima's long hair as she gazed at the horizon. They had claimed almost all of Whitebeard's former territories, easily crushing any remnants of resistance. With his crew dead, most of the islands had fallen without much of a fight. "Speaking of which, we've pretty much secured all the other islands, haven't we?" Ultima asked, her tone more serious now. "Nothing left to challenge us." Rimuru nodded. "We've crushed any resistance that remained. It's just a matter of consolidating power and ruling those territories now. The citizens had no choice but to submit once their protectors were gone." Ultima smiled darkly, the glint of ambition shining in her eyes. "Perfect. This world is finally starting to take shape under our rule." Just then, a loud screech echoed through the sky. The sound of wings flapping approached, and a seagull descended toward the deck. One of the ship's crew members quickly fetched the paper tied to the bird's leg and handed it to Rimuru. "A newspaper already?" Ultima tilted her head, curious. "Let's see what they're saying about us now." Rimuru unfolded the newspaper, skimming through the headlines until he stopped at the bounty section. His eyes widened slightly, a small smile tugging at his lips. Well, it looks like Sylphira and Kalis have become quite popular." At the sound of her name, Sylphira stepped forward from the shadows, intrigued. "What is it?" she asked, folding her arms across her chest. Rimuru turned the paper around, showing Sylphira her new bounty. "Congratulations, Sylphira. Your bounty has risen to 1,380,000,000 berries." Sylphira's violet eyes gleamed with pride, a grin spreading across her face. "Is that so? I knew they'd notice my strength eventually." She puffed out her chest proudly. "I'm the strongest general in this crew, after all." But then, her gaze flickered over to Kalis, who was also standing nearby, and her grin widened. "And what about Kalis?" Rimuru flipped the page, revealing Kalis's bounty. Kalis's new bounty is 1,348,000,000 berries. Sylphira's grin turned smug as she strolled over to Kalis, circling him like a predator eyeing its prey. "Oh dear, Kalis," she teased, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. "Looks like you're falling behind. Less than me, even after all your hard work." Kalis's expression remained stoic, but a small vein pulsed on his temple. He shot her a sharp look. "I'm not interested in childish games, Sylphira. A bounty means nothing. Strength speaks louder." "Oh." Sylphira's grin only grew wider. "Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? Well, the world seems to think differently." Kalis clenched his fists, his aura darkening as a slight burst of haki emanated from him. "Careful, Sylphira. Your bounty might be higher, but that doesn't mean you're stronger." "Is that a challenge?" she asked with a mischievous glint in her eye. Before the tension could escalate any further, Rimuru stepped between them, raising a hand. "That's enough," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We don't have time for infighting. Save your energy for our real enemies." Ultima, who had been watching the exchange with amusement, finally spoke up. "Sylphira, cut it out. We're not here to fight amongst ourselves. Besides, Rimuru's right. A bounty isn't everything." Sylphira sighed, her playful demeanor fading slightly. Fine. I was just having a little fun." Kalis relaxed his fists, but his eyes remained focused on Sylphira. He wasn't one for banter, but he wouldn't let her disrespect him so easily. Still, he knew better than to provoke a real fight in front of their leaders. Rimuru handed the newspaper to Sylphira, who took it and skimmed over her own bounty, her grin returning. "It's nice to be acknowledged though," she murmured. "Even if it's just numbers." Ultima chuckled and patted Sylphira's shoulder. "You've earned it. Both of you have. We couldn't have crushed Whitebeard's remnants without you too." Kalis gave a nod of appreciation, though his eyes remained watchful of Sylphira. "We were just doing our duty." "Speaking of which," Ultima added, turning her gaze toward the horizon, "we're almost home. Veldanava Island should be coming into view soon." Rimuru glanced over the water, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the distance. "Good. It's time to regroup and focus on ruling our territories. We've taken enough land, but now we need to establish real control." Sylphira leaned against the ship's railing, staring at the endless ocean. "Ruling will be easy. It's the rebellions that will be fun to crush." Kalis glanced at her, unimpressed. "You think too much about bloodshed, Sylphira. Ruling isn't just about crushing your enemies. It's about maintaining order." Sylphira shrugged, not particularly bothered by his disapproval. "I leave the boring stuff to you, Kalis. I'm more interested in keeping our enemies in line." Before their banter could continue, one of the crew members called out from the crow's nest. "Landho." Rimuru turned toward the horizon, and there it was. Veldanava Island, their territory, their home. A sense of satisfaction washed over him as the island drew closer. Ultima smiled, folding her arms as she watched the island grow larger in the distance. "Home sweet home," she muttered. "It's been a long journey, but we're finally back." Rimuru nodded, though his mind was already racing with thoughts of their next steps. "Once we land, we'll need to consolidate power across all the territories we've taken. Make sure every island knows who's in charge now." Sylphira grinned. "I can handle that. I'll make sure no one forgets who their new rulers are." Kalis, ever the strategist, added, "We should also establish a network of loyal soldiers on each island. If rebellions start, we'll need forces to crush them quickly." Rimuru nodded, appreciating Kalis's foresight. "Agreed. We can't afford any weak links." As the ship sailed closer to Veldanava Island, Ultima stretched her arms above her head, her muscles tense from the long voyage. "I'm ready to relax for a bit. This war has been exhausting." Rimuru smirked. "You say that now, but I bet in a day or two you'll be itching for another fight." Ultima chuckled. "You know me too well." Sylphira, still holding the newspaper, glanced down at her bounty one last time before folding it up and tucking it into her pocket. "Well, let's make sure our return is grand. It's time to remind Veldanava who their rulers are." Kalis, ever composed, stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the island. "This is just the beginning. We've taken Whitebeard's territories, but there's still much more to be done." Rimuru and Ultima exchanged a glance, both of them feeling the same surge of ambition. They had come so far, but their journey to complete domination was far from over. With their generals by their side and their territories secured, they were ready to carve their names into the new world. The ship docked on the shores of Veldanava Island, and as Rimuru, Ultima, Sylphira, and Kalis disembarked, a sense of power and purpose filled the air. This was only the beginning of their reign.